So I'm Howard Teach. I'm chair of the Manhattan Jewish Historical Initiative. Is this the most incredible group of people you could ever imagine that would come in as the class of 219? It's important in this time, when we're hearing a lot of things that we haven't heard in a lifetime, that you recognize in freedom the wonderfulness of the Jewish community in America, what we've accomplished, the freedoms we have, and the amazing role that we're taking not only here but throughout the world. That's what this group is. And that's what we should be talking about and what we should be proud about. And why we're particularly thrilled to have this right now at this time. Because we want everybody to go out and say, I was at this amazing gathering with all the people from my Jewish community who are making such a difference in the world, and we're so proud, and tell them that. We don't have to be negative, we just have to be positive and proud. So we started these Halls of Fame. This is the third annual. This will bring us up to 30 in Manhattan. You should know in our sister organizations we have in Brooklyn and Bronx, we have 42 inductees in Brooklyn, and we have 24 in the Bronx. So it's very, very exciting. We want you all to participate. I must say this, www.manhattanjewish.org. You can learn the bios of all the people here, the ones who have come in before, sharing the history of Manhattan Jewish community, and send in your stories, because I'm sure a lot of you have them, of what happened in your family, on the block, and so forth, so it can be shared with everybody. The next person, everybody knows. Everybody loves as well, because he's done more for more people than you could ever imagine. And I asked him if and he's been very supportive of us. As a matter of fact, the New York Board of Rabbis is our fiscal conduit. But he did something very, very special, and I thought it was significant that he say a few words about it. He can't get in depth about it because it was something, and he'll explain. But we all know about the cartoon that the Times had. Rabbi Joe reached out to the Times and set up a meeting. And it was an important one. And I asked if he'd say a few words just to tell us about it. I thought it was worth hearing about it, even as we go into the celebration of the Hall of Famers. So, Rabbi Joe Potasnik.
Let me just say to you, my father taught me years ago that I don't care what kind of Jew you are, as long as you're proud of the Jew you are. And Howard alluded to that earlier, in that what we need, I don't care where you are on that religious spectrum, but you got to be proud of where you are on that spectrum. So we decided, 12 rabbis of all the different denominations, some on the left, the middle, the right, that we needed to have a serious sit-down conversation with the New York Times. We made the request, it was granted immediately. We met with publisher A.G. Sulzberger and the editorial page senior editor James Bennett. And what I said at the meeting was the following: the cartoon is over. There was an apology. There was a powerful op-ed piece by Bret Stephens. But I think the problem precedes the cartoon. I said the problem to me is in the reporting. You know, years ago, there was a story reported in a Russian paper about a horse race between, it was a Russian horse and an American horse, only 2 horses in the entire race. The American horse won. And in the report it said that the American horse came in next to last. Now, that is truthful, but doesn't really give you a clear picture of what happened. So what I said, and what many of us said, is we want you to look at your reporting. Why not have an independent audit? As many firms have audits. Have an audit of what has been reported over the years and let's see where you come out. James Gardner years ago wrote that there are two groups that pose challenges for us: unloving critics and uncritical lovers. They're two extremes. And what we're saying to the New York Times is we're not asking for favoritism. We're just asking for, when you criticize, make it respectful criticism. Make it honest criticism. Don't give content without context. Because if you're reporting, for example, what transpired recently with the Gaza attack on Israel, and you put down, the 600 missiles and Israel retaliated, but then you put down the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and you don't give the context for that, then people are thinking, well, of course Israel's going to get attacked. They're responsible for the entire problem. So we got a commitment from the Times that there would be a re-examination of the reporting to see what really is taking place. And I have to say, since we had the meeting, the stories have been okay, because there haven't been any stories so far. But let's wait and see. The proof is going to be in what transpires. But I do think, and I'm sure our honorees do the same thing, you got to be ready to stand up, stand tall, and speak and say what needs to be said. Nobody respects you, thank you, nobody respects you if you don't respect yourself. And I think that is critical. So I learned years ago that we had a magazine called Life, right? And after Life, there was a magazine called People. And after People, there was a magazine called Us. And after Us, there was a magazine called Self. We Jews read from right to left. So first it starts with self. Then it's about us as a people who just want to be treated fairly in this life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I'm here to say thank you to all the honorees and to Howard Teach. You know, there are very few people in the world who have an idea a minute and then carry them out. And this gentleman has been doing this not only for the wonderful Hall of Fame, but I can give you 10 other ideas. And some people talk, and nothing happens. Howard Teach makes so many lives better because of the work he does. So Howard, thank you for being you. And you all know that you all see Rabbi Potashnik in many different places, but I just start laughing when I walk in the room because he makes everybody's day better also because of his sense of humor, and he does it in the way that's appropriate for whatever audience he's in. You cannot imagine how many places that man shows up and then makes the world work as a result. So thank you, Rabbi. And Alan Gerson and I sat together in the city council for many years, and he's now taken his retirement of sorts to be a place for young people through his a foundation that he started for his mother. And you know, again, you have ideas, he's made it happen. Hundreds and hundreds of young people benefit from his foundation. And of course, being here with you, Victoria, is fabulous at the wonderful, wonderful center where we look up and we see the history. So I'm simply here to say congratulations to everybody. This is a very special occasion, and we will look forward to hearing the stories. The stories are much more interesting than Gail Brewer. Thank you very much.
And now it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our host, our MC for the evening, former City Councilman Alan Gerson, and an active, important part of our executive team of MJHI.
Good evening, Shalom Aleichem. That's just what I was expecting you to say, Rabbi. In case anyone's wondering, you are in the right place. This is a Jewish event in a society of mechanics. And we're fortunate, another stereotype broken. But welcome to the 3rd Annual Jewish Hall of Fame of the Manhattan Jewish Historical Initiative. And it's significant that this is the 3rd annual because, and Rabbi, correct me if I'm wrong, with number 3, we become an official tradition. This is now another, that's all we needed, right? Another Jewish tradition. But this is a great tradition for all the reasons that have been stated and all the reasons that will be stated, and the one guiding light who has engendered this tradition through his vision, his tenacity, leading a wonderful team, of course, of this initiative, but our team leader, let's ask him to rise in another round of applause for Howard Teach, please. You know, when I ran for city council the first time, people would ask me my qualifications, and my answer was, well, you know, I had been president of a synagogue for a good number of years, and if I could survive as president of a shul for any number of years, the city council should be a piece of cake. There's a lot of truth to that, and we'll talk more about that in the synagogue as the evening goes on. But I got to ask you to bear with me, please, just throughout this night, because I'm very nervous. You know, I've spoken in front of mayors and governors, even a president, but tonight I'm asked to MC in front of the two greatest MCs ever in the history of the world, right? The great Joel Gray and the great Rabbi Potasnik. So bear with me. Our first honoree is someone who has fought the fight for human rights throughout the world, an incredible lawyer, speaking as a fellow member of that profession, an incredible lawyer, and she has literally applied the law and her own legal brilliance to improve human rights for all people. And I want to single out and mention the work she has done on behalf of children, in addition to all of her other great accomplishments. You know, we are taught that by one of our prophets, and a child shall lead them. Another prophet, my mother, has always said that the key to a great society in the future was started with our children. Brooke Goldstein has recognized that. She has fought against children's rights abuses, and she has in particular fought against the use of children as human shields, and God forbid, heaven help us, as suicide bombers. And this is just one part of her incredible dedication to the cause of humanity through her work as an attorney on behalf of human rights. So it's my honor, yes, please, to call upon the brilliant barrister Brooke Goldstein, who will be joined by our great rabbinic authority, Rabbi Potasnik, again in conversation.
There are people here who may not know the particulars of the Lawfare Project. Could you just give some of the highlights of the work you do?
Yes, but I have to thank my parents for coming, and my husband, and my children, and my family, and for being so supportive, and obviously everyone here in the committee for giving me this honor. I'm so humbled to be here.
Well, time's up. Thank you so much.
All right, so in a nutshell, the Lawfare Project started really because after I produced my film, where at great personal risk I filmed leaders of Islamist terrorist organizations recruiting innocent Muslim children towards violence, and I traveled the world talking about the threat of Islamist terrorism and theologically motivated violence, people around me started getting sued. Everybody who was talking publicly about the threat of radical Islam started getting sued, started being called an Islamophobe. And I researched into all the legal funds that are in this country, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Legal Fund for America, ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center. I saw all the human rights violations that were happening and civil rights violations against Jews around the world. And I said, I want to work for the Jewish Legal Fund. You know, where is it? And I met with a mentor, Malcolm Hoenlein, a wonderful leader of the community, and he said to me, there is none, you do it, and subletted me a cubicle in his office, and we started the first ever pro-Israel litigation fund, and we have grown to over 350 lawyers, 33 major law firms. We have filed over 76 legal actions in 16 different jurisdictions around the world to uphold the basic civil rights of the Jewish community. And the underlying, thank you, the underlying motivation is that we have to respect ourselves. If we don't stand up for our basic civil rights, nobody will. The truth and the law is on our side, so we have to advocate for ourselves in courts of law around the world.
Let's talk about the college campus, because that has become a minefield, a battlefield, and I know you've taken on some major advocacy there on behalf of Jewish students. But let's talk about the crisis on campus. I was reading an article recently where the author said maybe Jewish kids today should consider going to a Christian university. It may be safer for them there in terms of retaining their identity than on many of the secular campuses. Talk about the campus today.
So what we are seeing right now on the campus space is an alarming rise of unlawful discrimination against students because of their Jewish heritage or their Zionist cultural ethnic identity. And we just actually had a monumental groundbreaking settlement with San Francisco State University, where CSU, the California State University system, agreed to recognize the rights of Jewish students to equal protection, but also recognize that Zionism is an essential part of the Jewish identity, the ethnic, cultural, religious identity. It is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. We should be proud of it, and expressions of which are protected under state law and under, obviously, the student code. And that was a major victory. But what we're seeing now is Title VI violations, free speech violations, and the most important thing is to empower the students. And it's not their job to become plaintiffs in major litigation. It's their job to go to school and have fun. But at this point, what we're seeing are such violations that it's important the community rallies around when those students do choose to avail themselves through litigation. And I want to make a point. This country has a history of impact litigation. The fabric of our free society has been built by seminal cases, Roe v. Wade, okay, Brown v. Board of Education, desegregation, female abortion rights. Where are the seminal civil rights cases protecting the Jewish community as a minority community in this country? Never before. There was one other case that settled, and then we were the second to litigate. Never before has a court considered whether Title VI of the Civil Rights Act should protect Jewish students as a minority community on campus that receive federal funds. So I think the campus space is important, but also the general space that we're seeing. A lot of people talk about BDS, unlawful commercial discrimination. Just like you can't have a store that says, no Chinese allowed, or I don't do business with Africans, you cannot say, I don't do business with Israelis. It's illegal. So instead of talking about BDS, we have to talk about illegal commercial discrimination happening against the Jewish community as a minority community, because that is the progressive dialogue. That is the right way to speak.
She's a renowned producer, founded Tribeca Film Festival, Tribeca Film Institute, and a Rosenthal. So let me ask you, I read up that you began in the thought of becoming a politician or working in politics, and you started as a page.
I started as a page in Providence, Rhode Island. When I was the first high school and the first woman page in the Rhode Island House of Representatives, and quickly discovered that the pages were making more than the representatives, and decided that I was always interested in storytelling, so I thought I would do documentary films. I was always interested in how you can make a difference in the world by the stories that you tell and the stories that you can share, and thought I could get bigger than Rhode Island, which is still the smallest state in the country.
Mm-hmm. So you decided to go on and do filmmaking to tell stories. Do you have a favorite film?
It depends what group I'm in terms of movies I had the most fun working on, I'd say that Wag the Dog with Dustin Hoffman and Bob De Niro was probably one of the most fun films because it came together so quickly, and we made the film in 29 days, which in movie terms is very quick. And then all of a sudden people thought we knew something about Clinton Lewinsky and a bomb drop on Sudan, which we didn't. We thought we were making political satire, and but the term "wag the dog" has become in the lexicon And certainly if you watch that movie now, and there's a whole song about we guard the Canadian border, and if you listen to that, it sounds very much like the guy in the White House currently. But going back to my reason for doing this, it's I always I didn't come from a religious background. My parents sent me to a yeshiva in Providence, not because we were religious, but really so that we could know what we'd wanted to, rally against. So dismiss it with knowledge. And I tried to raise my two daughters in a home that was, well, we weren't religious. It was sitting around for Shabbat, even if Shabbat might be on Wednesday, because it was the only time I could get the whole family around a table. And that having that sense of family and community, and what it means to be a Jew and community. And it was interesting as I was talking to my daughter, my 20-year-old daughter, who's just back from school in Ohio, and telling her what I thought I might say. She said to me, "Yeah, Mom," and pardon me for quoting her specifically. She said, "Yeah, Mom, I thought all that Jewish that you were trying to push on me all those years, like, I didn't buy it." She said, "But then I was on this class trip, and I saved this, because I know you like to save things, Mom. I saved this. We were at the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, on October 27th, which was 5 miles away, and there were gunshots. And I felt Jewish, Mommy. I felt Jewish." And so I'm doing this tonight because I'm proud to stand up and be a Jew. I also find that when I wear my grandmother's mezuzah, which I'm wearing, all of a sudden in today's world, in the Trump world, I'm feeling as if I'm wearing this because it's an act of defiance, and I don't like that. My grandmother was always very superstitious, so she also had a 4-leaf clover. Anyway, I think I answered the question.
I think you did. There are lots of films about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and do you think there's a new attempt that can be made, either through film or art, to educate the many people in America who don't know a thing about the Holocaust?
There are certainly a number of films. We did a film about Frank Lowy that was at the film festival. He's actually the founder of Westfield, and he was a Holocaust survivor. There are certainly a lot of films that have been made, and we need to continue to tell these stories. I think the proudest moment for me, not just talking about it as a filmmaker, and the stuff that we do at Tribeca to talk about diversity and all people's diversity and stories that are diverse and telling underserved population, but we cannot forget, and we have to ensure that our children are coming into our culture and our world. And I was really proud when my 20-year-old said, "See, Mom, it did rub off. I now understand."
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You all know that saying, location is important to real estate, is important to any business. I could tell you it's important to a synagogue. The shul where I was president was located directly in between the Chelsea Hotel and the OTB betting parlor. That was a perfect place. It attracted a lot of people every day of the week to come in and pray. And then, depending on what they were praying for, they either went to the hotel or to the betting parlor. But that being said, our next honoree has enabled our community to transcend location. He has brought the power, he's had the vision and the wherewithal to bring the power of the media, of TV in particular, to unite our communities wherever we may be physically located, through his founding of the Russian Jewish Television Network, and through the network, which has been broadcasting, and tonight is broadcasting this event. But to talk more about this, it's my honor to call upon one of our great rabbis and visionaries, Rabbi Mark Golub, who will be joined by Howard Teach.
This opportunity I treasure to have you answering questions for me.
Everybody, hope you know, JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service, is on many systems throughout the country, including here in New York on Spectrum and on Optimum and on RCN, on DirecTV, and I had the privilege of interviewing this man, Howard Teach, who has done so much for the Jewish world. He deserves another round of applause.
Yeah, tonight's about you. So here's the important thing. What you've done is visionary. It's one of the most important things for the Jewish community, that we actually have a video outlet to now practically the world in terms of what you're doing, and it's been expansive. How did you get this idea? It's a big one. It's a huge one. And it wasn't overnight, and it's not like you had $1 billion to start. You've grown it. You've managed to make something as significant as anybody could imagine, with everybody coming on your shows.
It's a long story. I'll make it very, very short. I was at Columbia. I love media. I ended up at WMC Radio, and I've had this dream. The dream has been to use the power of the media, first radio and then television, to excite Jews about being Jewish, and to explain to the entire non-Jewish world that cares about Israel and wants to know more about their Jewish roots. I wanted there to be a place in American media. And so it was just a dream of mine. I never thought I'd be able to get it done. I got it done with the help of extraordinary people such as you and Brooke Goldstein, who does a show on JBS, and she's as brilliant there as she was here. And it was because I had this dream. It was a quixotic dream, and it came true. And now the most important thing about JBS is there is a Jewish presence, Howard, on American television. And it has created a sense of community for Jews all over the country, many of who do not live in major urban centers where there is a strong Jewish cultural life. And it gives Jews a sense of, as you and as Brooke and as Rabbi Potasnik mentioned, that he's also on JBS all the time. It gives Jews a sense of pride to have a Jewish channel on America, a mainstream channel, just like any other channel, looks the same, feels the same, and is just a little bit better than most Jewish channels.
So most people have seen something on there, and they can actually go on the website and go on demand if they want. If you haven't, you need to, and we need to be really supportive of what you're doing.
Thank you.
But you're a rabbi as well.
I am.
It's not just this media star.
Yes.
How did Judaism come into your life? Obviously, you were born that, but you obviously have it in your kishkas.
Yes. First of all, I was surrounded by grandparents and parents who were deeply committed to the Jewish tradition and to being Jewish. And again, something that's been said tonight is said so beautifully. It doesn't matter where anybody is on the observance scale. What matters is Jewish identity and having a sense of that Jewishness is important to you and that you want to transmit it to your children. So that's what I was born into. My mother's father, my maternal grandfather, had smicha from one of the famed yeshivot of Eastern Europe, and that was the Slobodka Yeshiva. So he was an Orthodox Jew, and I used to go to shul with him on West 79th Street at the Karl Bach Synagogue. At the same time, my father's father, my paternal grandfather, Dr. Jacob S. Golub, who became a pioneer in Jewish education, was a colleague of Mordechai Kaplan and a founder of the Reconstructionist movement. So we were at the SAJ on West 86th Street. So I grew up with Orthodoxy and Reconstructionist Judaism in me. My home with my parents was a mainstream conservative household where my father was the founder of the first conservative synagogue in Trumbull, Connecticut. And When I decided to become a rabbi, I chose to become a rabbi at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. And so I am, by no dint of my own, just by circumstance, I have Orthodox, Reconstructionist, Conservative, and Reform Judaism flowing in me, and I understand one thing more than anything else. No movement is right, no movement is better than any other, no Jew is better than any other, and the most important thing we have to understand is the Jewish tradition is an embrace of life. We're not a religion, we're a family with a unique embrace of life called Torah. In English, we call it Judaism. Judaism and Torah are the same word. One's in Hebrew and one's in English. And whatever I do is an attempt to help people understand what this Jewish embrace of life is through Midrash and through teaching, and now through JBS.
So last night, and the time goes very quickly here, so we have one more minute. Last night, it's a Yashikoak, a Mazel Tov
Thank
to you. They moved the studios into Manhattan. He had the official opening. What has it meant to you to be able to get some of the genius of the Jewish community in one place, particularly in your living room, essentially? Because that's what it's like to be interviewed by him. You feel like you're sitting in a living room, and all of a sudden you're saying things you never dreamed you'd say on air. What's it like for you to have that as something that's so much a part of your life?
Okay, and you say it so beautifully. You know, it's an enormous kick for me to be able to host JBS. That's all I am. The real strength of this channel is the people who I have the opportunity to sit with or present through the lectures or the panels or the symposiums or the conferences they do. It is all about the people, Howard. I am in awe. I sit with the most brilliant, most committed, most involved men and women who are helping to shape Jewish life. And so for me, you have put your finger on what has been the most exhilarating aspect, the most rewarding aspect of doing the first serious Jewish channel in the world in the English language. And you are among them, and Brooke is among them, and Rabbi Potasnik is among them. We have Lilith magazine represented on this stage. You have people here who are exceptional, and what they're doing is using their exceptionalism to enhance Jewish life, and the fact that I can sit with them and bring them to the public is the biggest thrill of all.
And you're exceptional, and we're thrilled you're now part of
Thank
the
you.
Manhattan Jewish Hall of Fame.
You know, in Israel, we made the Negev bloom. In Manhattan, Daniel Biederman made Bryant Park bloom. As a kid growing up in the city in the late 60s, the 70s, the early 80s, never in my wildest imagination would I have imagined a merry-go-round, an ice skating rink, a lawn for people to relax and enjoy themselves, really in the middle of Manhattan, in a place that we once would go out of our way to avoid. So you truly have transcended a condition to make it better for all of us.
Dan Biederman, like me, has been doing work in our city for a very long time, since the 1980s. He was one who started the Bryant Park Corporation, as Alan indicated. It was a park that was in deep neglect. The 34th Street Partnership, which again has had an amazing set of successes, and also the Grand Central Partnership, which he no longer runs, but he's really known as the business development person for all the bids. Look to Dan Biederman. He's president of the 34th Street Partnership, Bryant Park, and he'll talk about what he's been doing around the United States in terms of transforming public spaces. My first question, Dan, is how did you end up doing this work? What brought you to make our city so much a better place?
Good question. Thank you, Gail. My wife and daughter are right over there, and my wife persuaded me to take the job that was offered to me by David Rockefeller's people. Mrs. Astor was accosted by a drug seller looking like Mrs. Astor, going into the New York Public Library, and to make sure she understood that this was drug sellers' turf, they started offering her marijuana in the fall of 1979. So she yelled at David Rockefeller at the meeting she was attending, saying Bryant Park had to be fixed. And I was the 25-year-old who got hired for it. I wasn't sure this was going to be a good job, but my wife said, anybody who does anything that's good for the Rockefellers probably is going to have some kind of career, so you should do that. So it was accidental that it started, and it was very rough at the beginning. And most of the West Side elected officials were supportive. Dick Gottfried, we had a few disagreements with.
Always.
Yes.
It continues, Dan.
We feel the same way about the marijuana initiative. I've been banging on him. Don't legalize marijuana, Dick. This will be very bad for public spaces. I haven't bothered Gail about it because she's not the one who'll decide. But it's been a long road, and you went to Harvard undergraduate?
Graduate.
Graduate. Gail's an underdog because New York, as you know, is run by St. John's and Fordham. So she somehow has made it despite that. But we have a very good support, and it's nice to be honored as a Jew. My kind of recognition of my Jewishness is all over the place, some silly stuff. I'm a baseball fan, and I pay a lot of attention to the Jewish players in the major leagues. If you all don't know this, Jews are overrepresented in Major League Baseball now. There are a higher percentage of Jews playing in Major League Baseball than percentage of Jews in the American public. And I'll point out to Susan, when there's a Jewish pitcher and a Jewish hitter going against each other, I say, Susie, watch this. The Jews are dominating this little interaction. But aside from that, her father used to take great pride in any Jews who had made it, starting from humble roots. And he would remind us if there was somebody we were talking about who was Jewish, he'd say, he's a Yidel, you know. I always remember that when we talk about the strivers who get somewhere.
Well, you're also repairing the world in terms of your Tikkun Olam is also part of what you're doing, I would say, in terms of tradition. So how do you go about sort of figuring out between the 34th Street, Bryant Park, and even across the United States, what will, in fact, repair the world or repair the space? How do you go about thinking how to do that?
Well, most of the spaces we work in, the aim is to say to the local people with a stake in that area, don't bang on government and say that government has to put more money forward. There are other ways to bring money and resources to these spaces. We have great parks in Dallas and Houston and Green Bay, Wisconsin, I was just at, and Greensboro. And it's a more kind of resourceful pitch to the local real estate owners who've been terrific with regard to Bryant Park, and many of them Jewish. And it's a creative way of bringing life to spaces backed up by resources beyond what government can do, because there are 87 people who are telling Gail to spend, the resources she has on things that are very much in need. I'm just at the beginning of the movement. I wish I was younger so I could see how it all ends out.
I think you've done a great job. You have definitely repaired the world, Dan Biederman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next inductee continues probably the greatest of Jewish traditions, and that is the recording and transmission from generation to generation of sacred memory. She does it so well with the most heart-wrenching and difficult of our collective memory in her work as the leader, the builder, the creator of the 9/11 Museum. It was an honor to support your work at the beginning, and it's an honor to welcome you, very well deserved, to this Jewish Hall of Fame.
Alice, you're internationally recognized as a leader in the field of museum practice with expertise in history, ethnic heritage, and memorial museums. So I'm curious, is there something specific in your life that sparked an interest in that field?
It's such an interesting question, Lori, because I never imagined a museum career. I mean, that wasn't my life plan. I went to museums with my mom as a kid, and I always had pleasant memories of museums, but it wasn't a career choice. And certainly, if anybody had told me when I was a little girl that, I would grow up and end up directing museums of the most horrific events in human history, I would have thought they were crazy. That was not a life goal. But, life and careers are not linear. And, I began an academic career in the history of religion, which when I went to the University of Chicago Divinity School, and what's a nice Jewish girl like me doing in a place like that, I went to study what was then called comparative religion. And when I got there, the professor I had gone to study with went emeritus, and the young Turks in the department decided they would change it. And they added an S to religion. It became the history of religions. And I was told to pick a religion in a particular time, a particular place. And I had no idea what I wanted because that wasn't why I had gone there. And my advisor said, well, I think you need to do Jewish studies in 16th, 17th century Central and Eastern Europe. And I went, okay. And I was doing a paper on some obscure thing, Tachinot, the women's devotional prayer in 16th century Romania or something. And the university library had no resources. And my professor said, well, there's a College of Judaica down on South Michigan Avenue. Go use the library there. So I did. I went there and I saw as I was walking in this very sweet Jewish museum on the ground floor, Spertus. It was Spertus College, and that was the Spertus Museum of Judaica. And I went up to the library, did my research, and on the way down, I, in a moment of whatever, I pushed the elevator where it said museum offices, went in. This would not happen today, I can assure you. Looked for the director's office, found it, knocked on the door, poked my head in and said, do you need a researcher this summer? And he said, yes. And I went and found out that I loved the environment of museums. I loved it. I loved everything about it. And, the rest is history.
It was all Bashir.
It was Bashir.
Bashir. So, in the context of your work, how has Judaism influenced your understanding of memory when a museum commemorates tragic episodes of human history?
I actually think my understanding of memory is deeply rooted in my Judaism. You think about the fact that in Exodus 20, where the commandments for how to constitute a covenanted community are given, the fourth commandment starts with Zachor. So remember is a commandment at the very beginning. You think about the V'ahavta. Every Sabbath in the liturgy, we are given a series of ways you can remember the commandments. Talk of them when you're sitting in your house, when you're on the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. I mean, all of these are ways of remembering. But the interesting part for me is that the very last line, which is be mindful of these mitzvot, these commandments, so that you may become a consecrated community to your God. The verb is zikaru, which is the verb to remember, it's zachor, but in the communal you, the plural you. So as a community, we are obligated to remember. And I could go on and on, Passover, Seder, but I think the most important part of my Jewish understanding of memory is that we don't remember and we don't repeat the story just to remember. You don't go through the Haggadah year after year telling the same story year after year just to tell the story. It is a ritual of remembering intended to teach the youngest members of the tribe, your children, what it means to be a good human being. So each of us is obligated to feel as if we came out of Egypt. Each of us is obligated to treat the stranger with compassion because we were strangers in Egypt. So we must remember our own experience, whether we lived it or not, in order to know how to be human beings.
Unfortunately, we're getting the time signal, but thank you for all that you do. We appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Gray, how am I doing?
What are you doing?
I'm trying to figure that out myself. Maybe you'll tell us. But right now I'm here to thank you on behalf of all of us and so many more, you have made us over the years. You have made us laugh, you have made us dance, you made us sing, you made us cry, you made us think, and you deepened our appreciation and our understanding of life. And therefore, it's appropriate that, as Rabbi Golub spoke earlier about the meaning of Judaism and our commitment to life, it's appropriate that we more than welcome you to the Hall of Fame and ask Rabbi Mark Golub to converse with you. Please join me in welcoming Joel Gray, the great Joel Gray.
Born Joel David Katz.
That's how I was born.
And to a lovely mother and father. Your father, by the way, Mickey, was in show business, correct?
My father was a great comedian by the name of Mickey Katz, and he was a great musician, a klezmer clarinetist, and I always thought he was like from another world, magical, because we were all in Cleveland trying to be Americans. And he held on to his sense of being a Jew in the most wonderful ways. And hearing his klezmer clarinet in my home just absolutely supported me throughout my life. And actually, I think in a way, led to my ability to tell the story in Fiddler on the Roof.
Mm-hmm.
And there was music, and for some reason, he was the only one in my family who spoke Yiddish. His family did. My mother's family did not. And I found myself, when I was 9 years old, I wanted to be an actor. And I found myself in a completely Gentile atmosphere, the Cleveland Playhouse, which gave me the idea that I could act and tell a story. But I was in this very, very unique and different area that anybody in my family had ever been in. And I was accepted and loved and treated like even though I was 9, I was treated like an adult if I did my job. So I came to love acting, and I never knew exactly what it was I was going to do, but when I was about 15, I wanted to be on the stage, and there was no work. I was a failure at 15. And my dad did a show, a Yiddish variety show called Borschtcapades. Was not people skating on borscht. It was a variety show, and I said, could I be in this show? He said, well, you don't speak Yiddish. I said, I don't. That's true. He said, but maybe you could learn something. So I learned a song called Romania, Romania. That was really difficult.
Yes.
But I did it. But in order to be in his show, he had to write me a song to come out on stage. I don't speak Yiddish. So he wrote me this song. When I was 8 days old, they named me Yossel. Oh, what a simcha, such a celebration. Oh, my mishpacha drank a toast, l'chaim, while I was suffering a minor operation. That's what he wrote. And later on, I went to kindergarten. I said, teacher, Yossel is my name. She said, the name of Yossel sounds like a schlemossel. From Yossel, my name became Joel Gray. And that is probably, that experience when I was 15 or 16 years old, gave me the feeling that somewhere in my life I would do something with Yiddishkeit. And when Zalman Malotek called me last year, he said, would you like to direct or play Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish? I said, you just heard what I know in Yiddish. I said, I don't speak it, and I don't understand it. But let me call you in the morning. And I went to bed that night, and I said, I don't know what to do or how to do it, but I know I'm supposed to. And it was the joy of my life, and we're so grateful that people seem to connect to it, Jews and non-Jews, so I'm a lucky guy.
So, Joel, you've won a Tony, you've won an Emmy, you've won a Golden Globe, now you've won...
What's the matter with Oscar?
And an Oscar, exactly right. Every now and then there's a performer, an entertainer, who becomes iconic because of a role. And you will always be known for cabaret. But it's not the only thing you've done. You did cabaret. You were fabulous in Chicago. I saw you on stage. When I think of Mr. Cellophane, I can only think of Joel Grey. And you have everything you ever touch. You do it with a unique brilliance of your craft. As you think back over your career, and you understand everybody says, oh, there's Joel Grey of cabaret. Is it what has been the most rewarding for you, or has there been other moments in your professional career which the audience may not understand is the one that you carry with you all the time?
Cabaret was very important to me because I felt so strongly as a Jew that I wanted to make this character the worst, the ugliest, the most frightening human being on the earth.
You wanted that?
I wanted that character.
Why?
Because he was a Nazi.
Yes.
And it was my chance to say what I had to say about Nazism. So that was very important to me. But I think there's one other role that I will never forget, and that was playing Ned Weeks in The Normal Heart.
Yes. Which
was a great, great play, and another highlight of my very fortunate career.
You have a bar mitzvah ceremony or not?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
What was that like?
That was good. That was good. I remember my...
You remember what?
My nephews used to say, go ahead, get up there and do your maftir. And they were threatening me that when I would say the beginning of my maftir, which was, hello, chivnei, they were going to say, goodbye, and they were going to walk out.
You remember some of the words from your maftir,
yes.
From your haftarah. That is fabulous. And you know, there are so many people who are Jewish in the entertainment world, it's sort of like a cliche, but not all of them care about their Jewish identity. Keep going. I'm asking you seriously. Was it ever a problem for you to be identified as a Jewish performer?
Oh, absolutely. For most Jewish performers, there was a long time prejudice, and that's why people changed their names and their features and their whole attitude toward life, is because it was a limitation once. It no longer is, but I remember feeling anti-Semitism intensely throughout my life. And that's another reason that I was so excited to do Fiddler on the Roof.
You have been a gift to us, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mazel tov to you.
Thank you.
Our next honoree has devoted his life's work to solving the greatest mystery of my life, and that is what is going on in my brain.
So you have won a few awards in your life. You won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 2000. A few years ago, after Elie Wiesel read your book, In Search of Memory, he said, "This is an extraordinary book by one of the greatest scientists of the mind alive." And just a few weeks ago, of your most recent book, the Washington Post said, in regard to you, that you are the greatest neuroscientist of our time. Those are humbling words for me to read. And I want to ask you a few questions. You have spent over 50 years studying the mind, the brain, memory, words that for most of us seem almost too vague to get a handle on. Most of the people in this audience will go home tonight, and tomorrow they'll have a memory of this event. If we ask them, what did you see? They'll describe this or some other discussion here, and some will have a very clear memory, and some not so memory. Now, you started your journey by studying about a little slug, I think, a little called aplesia, which was your journey to extraordinary discoveries of how the human brain, and especially memory, works in creating who we are. So let me ask you a very simple question about these 50 years. From all your work, what have you discovered that's most extraordinary about how we create memories and how the memories create us?
Well, let me step back a little bit. I have, almost from the beginning of my career, I mean, I trained in medicine, but very rapidly got into research because I enjoyed it so much, taking a reductionist approach. I take a complex problem that I find fascinating and try to study the simplest example so I can try to drive it into the ground. And I did this with learning and memory. I took a very simple reflex in a very simple animal, and I modified that reflex with learning, and I looked to see what happens, and I saw that the way nerve cells connect with one another, they're called synapses, are altered by experience. So if you learn something, there are changes in your brain whereby nerve cells communicate. If you forget something, those connections become weaker. And I was able to elaborate that in a number of different ways. That really opened up the biological study of learning and memory in the brain.
And do we exist without a memory? Or is memory,
No.
is memory really a definition of who we are?
You are who you are, what you learn and what you remember. If you don't learn anything, you're garnished, and if you don't remember anything, you're garnished. So it's good to do both of them.
With all the extraordinary work that you have done and are still very, very actively doing at Columbia and the Zuckerman Institute and many other places, what percent do you think of what there is to know about the brain do we know today?
A very small percentage. You have to remember the brain is the most complex organ in the universe. We understand the brain of simple animals to some degree. Even there, the understanding is not complete. But the human brain, we're very far from understanding. We have regional breakdowns. We know that certain areas are involved in memory, other areas are involved in perception, visual perception, olfactory perception. So we have a breakdown what different areas do. But the detailed understanding of how each one of those percepts and actions occur, we're just beginning to explore.
In the next, say, 20 years, what do you think will be some of the more exciting areas that neuroscientists will be exploring?
I think there are many interesting areas. We really don't have a very good understanding of some of the major psychiatric illnesses, schizophrenia, depression, to find out exactly where they're localized in the brain, what are the anatomical changes associated with them. We might be in a position, if we could really focus in on those areas, evaluate different treatments to see which treatment is most effective in modulating the prefrontal cortex or the occipital cortex or the parietal cortex, to see which treatment is appropriate for which disorder.
When you accepted the Nobel Prize, and I read your talk earlier today, One of the things you said, and perhaps it relates to what you were just saying, is that the biological study of the mind is more than a scientific inquiry of great promise. It is also an important humanistic behavior.
I love that. This is absolutely true, and this is one of the reasons I like the problem so much. I've always liked the bridge between humanism and science. Many people think that science is a cold-hearted, brutal discipline, very, rigorous, focused, and they don't realize the problems people tackle have really important human elements to them. And people do it because they want to understand human behavior and the human mind to a significant degree. So I focused in on that part to a very great degree.
I'd like to ask you two questions about your Jewish background. You were, and your family were refugees from the Nazis who came to the United States in 1939. Your grandfather in Brooklyn educated you enough so that you were accepted to the Yeshiva of Flatbush, also my alma mater. And you studied there for a number of years, traditional Jewish texts and Hebrew. What effect did that have on your path and your identity?
Well, very profound. I mean, I was a Jew before that. I was very comfortable with it. And my grandfather, who was the one that helped me get into the Yeshiva of Flatbush, was a very Orthodox Jew and a wonderful man. But I think the Yeshiva of Flatbush deepened my understanding of Judaism. Obviously, by the time I finished my 4 years at the Yeshiva of Flatbush, I could speak Hebrew almost as well as I could speak English. I was learning them at the same time.
The last question. When you received the Nobel Prize, Austria was suddenly very proud of you. And they all talked about the Austrian Nobel Prize that had just been awarded. You were quoted as saying that this was certainly not an Austrian Nobel, it was a Jewish American Nobel. And the president of Austria...
You see, that's my greatest strength, chutzpah.
And at that time, the president of Austria called you and asked basically, how can we make it right? One of the most extraordinary stories that I have read. And you told him what Austria had to do to make it right. Could you tell us what you told him and what Austria has then done in subsequent years?
There was a very famous boulevard in Vienna called Lueger Platz. And Lueger was one of the most anti-Semitic mayors in Vienna, and he really taught Hitler how to go about developing a systematic anti-Semitic approach. So to have a major, the university actually was sitting on this. And I said, this is impossible. You've got to change that name and call it University Ring rather than Lueger Ring. And they did that.
And I think you all...
Chutzpah.
And I think that is how to speak to a president of a country when he calls you and wants to know how to make it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bizu Riki Mullu, she has, through her energy and her insight, enlightened us, led us to understand a great part of our Jewish culture, history, and tradition.
Your LinkedIn profile says you are an artist, an activist, a social entrepreneur, and you are an advocate for the Ethiopian Jewish community. I'm going to ask you a two-part question. How do you react, and I've been asked the same question, how do you react when someone says, but you don't look Jewish? And secondly, how are you advocating for the Ethiopian community here in New York?
Many times people believe to be Jewish, you have to be white. If you are not white, maybe you are not Jewish. This is the reason really more make me to be involved. If we go back to the history of Judaism, we start really in the Middle East, and we were not so white. Maybe we were like olive color, darker color. So I'm very close to be Jewish color, and people I wanted to know. So this is like a lot of times the Ethiopian Jewish community here, when they walk to the synagogue, they said, oh, you don't look Jewish. And some of them, they get insulted because Ethiopian Jews very gentle, very, they not have so much chutzpah yet. So this is like how my idea is the Jewish people coming from all over in the world, but somehow the roots is the same. The Torah is the same. Maybe we use it in different languages. And I believe the Jewish people, it's like beautiful flowers. It's like different colors and different costume we bring from whatever we are, and then we can share it. We can make it more rich, more beautiful. This is the reason why I started the organization.
That's a lovely response. Now tell us how you're advocating here in the city for the Jewish Ethiopian community.
We have a nonprofit organization. It's called Hasida Shmela, Ethiopian Jewish Community of North America. So we do different programming. I'm a public speaker for all of the Jewish organization in North America, for the Federation, for Hadassah, for all of them. Plus that we start a nonprofit organization which is based in New York. We do different programming. One of the big programs we do every year, it's called the Sigd. I don't know if you heard of it. Mm-hmm. It's a national holiday in Israel from 2008. So every year we do it in different places, mostly in Manhattan. We bring rabbis, Ethiopian rabbis from Israel. We showing the costume of the Ethiopian Jews. Like one of the Sigd, it's based it used to be the Jewish holidays. Most of the Jewish people drop it, the Jewish community drop it, just Ethiopian Jews kept that holiday. It's like Simchato, it's like Shavuot. It's similar to Shavuot. It's like 50 days after Yom Kippur, and usually it's come out like late in November. In Ethiopia, the Jewish villages, they used to come to the highest a mountain, and like half days, like fasting and going up to remember God and Moses.
Oh, that's lovely.
So this is the one of the events we do in New York. So
great.
Please come in November.
What is the status of the Ethiopian community in Israel?
What do you mean the status?
Well, politically, economically, socially, etc.
Ethiopian Jewish community with the last immigration coming to Israel. Ethiopian Jewish community, I think when I'm thinking and seeing one of the Zionist Jews really coming to Israel, willing to walk to Sudan, to die, to get just to get to Israel, just to get to see Jerusalem. This is really beyond. In Ethiopia and Israel, it's very close. It's like 4.5 hours. It's not far. But Israel is one of the high-tech in 21st century. Ethiopia is still in the 14th century. So we come with so much love, so much Zionism, but we're not coming with a lot of education. We're not coming with a lot of money. So Ethiopian Jews, we have so much to catch up to.
Is there much discrimination in Israel against the community?
It's a lot of problems. I don't know if Ethiopian Jews, we come with a lot of money, with a lot of education, we will be the same. But when you are poor and you have no education, so you are in different class. So
we have to look to the future.
Yes, absolutely. The future is bright.
Yes, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is an honor.
A hallmark of the American Jewish civilization has been our commitment to the struggle and the fight for equality for all, and that includes equality between men and women. And I want to thank our next honoree, Susan Weidman Schneider, for all she has done and continues to do in epitomizing that sense of social justice which so much defines our community, and successfully leading the fight for equality for all people, but especially in the cause of feminism.
Making an impact
as editor-in-chief of the well-known independent Lilith since 1976 at its beginnings. What were your goals and interests as you created the publication?
Well, the magazine was always committed to being, as the tagline says, independent, Jewish, and frankly feminist. So the frankly feminist part of it was a little bit of challenge, particularly in the magazine's early years when feminism got a bum rap sometimes. But really, the goal all along has been to expand the access for women in Jewish life and at the same time to increase the value placed on women's own experiences. So it was equal access and equal value. Women certainly wanted a place at the table, the board table, on the bima. In rabbinical school, when Lilith started, there were almost no women rabbis. Sally Present had just been ordained in the Reform movement. Now, as we see, there are even in Orthodoxy women trained now and being ordained to take on rabbinic roles. So this wonderful expansiveness in Jewish life where women are taking on more roles has also opened the door for Jewish men. I mean, it's hardly that, not to think of the world entirely in binary terms, but that this is not a movement exclusively for equality for women, but to encourage participation of all sorts for all Jews. And we've often laughed and said that the etiquette that Lilith magazine has brought to Jewish life is that women opened the doors for men. And I think that that has certainly been true, where as we've worked for a more woman-friendly Judaism, we see that just as women want more and different roles in Jewish life, religiously and in our homes and so on, men want it too. So I think it has been a win-win situation. And that's not to say that it has been easy, because uncovering some of those challenging stories has come at some price. We've had courageous reporters looking at rabbinic sexual misconduct, looking at violence in Jewish homes, looking at a number of stories that for years it was hoped by some would never be made public. We now have a story in the works looking at addiction and the Jewish women who are caught in addiction. So much work still to be done.
So I was wondering, did your upbringing guide you into beginning Lilith or give you some sort of idea to run with?
Unlike many of you here, I did not grow up in New York. I grew up in Winnipeg in Canada in a very active Jewish community and grew up in a home where my mother did speak Yiddish. My father did not. My mother did. And I was very much drawn to aspects of Jewish life. But I think one of the formative experiences was that I was an active member of a junior congregation in a conservative synagogue run by two Israeli guys, progressive educators, and girls had equal roles with boys. So that I led services, there was no gender differentiation there, except of course for the bar and bat mitzvah parties, but that was a different matter. And so I think that where I didn't feel particularly trammeled as a kid for being a girl, not in my family and not in Jewish life. That said, one of the things that I must say was striking about being in New York, where I've spent most of my adult life, is the diversity of the Jewish community. That there are secular Jews and religious Jews, which there were in Winnipeg too. Winnipeg was described as a hotbed of many things, including that there were Jews who didn't believe in marriage, there were socialist Jews, there were religious Jews, but I knew no Mizrahi Jews. And growing up, I didn't know any Holocaust survivors. Winnipeg then did not have a big survivor community. And certainly there wasn't the kind of marvelous racial diversity, and we see Now in Lilith's pages, Jews of color, LGBT Jews, an opportunity really to amplify the voices of this diversity, which has been a real privilege and a great pleasure.
So what do you see for the future of Lilith and Jewish feminism here in the United States and abroad?
Well, Lilith has seen itself always, and it started as a collective of women with diverging points of view on some matters, but we saw Lilith as a voice of feminism in the Jewish world, and at the same time, a Jewish voice in the women's liberation movement. So I think we expect that the magazine will continue to do more of the same. We bring in young writers. Now we publish in print and digitally on a blog that's updated every day. We have Lilith salons meeting in more than 100 places around the country. So on these three platforms, digital and print and face-to-face, we just expect to be doing more of the same. As I say, unfortunately, there's plenty of work still to do.
Thank you so very much for sharing.
Thank you.
We all know the centrality of food to Jewish culture and Jewish tradition. You cannot think of Jewish cuisine without thinking of Russ and Daughters, but just as a dining table is more than a place to eat, so too Russ and Daughters is more than a place to go to pick up a bagel and cream cheese. You provide a connection, you provide a cultural connection for our entire community, and you extend it to the community at large.
Both of you had other careers, and so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you found your way into appetizing.
We have pretty different paths. I was raised in an ashram upstate in Monroe, New York. My mother was sort of the black sheep of the Russ family, and I rebelled from that and went to school, boarding school, and then school for chemical engineering, and worked in semiconductors in the Pacific Northwest for 5 years. And when I turned 25 or 26, I started thinking about my family's roots. And the matriarch of our family, who was our grandmother, Ann Federman, one of the daughters, and I wanted to know more about her life, and her life was Russ and Daughters, almost entirely. And not necessarily by choice, but she did carry the torch for a while, and her father started the business in 1914. So as that was happening for me, I heard through the grapevine that Niki's father was looking for his exit strategy, and I started speaking to him about getting into the business, which I was never involved. And over the course of 4 months, he tried to convince me not to get into the business, because why would I want to be in retail? It's not an easy life. And it just so happens Niki was doing her own thing at that moment and was going off to explore her own desires or path. And he said, come. And that was 16 years ago.
I grew up, I was a shop kid because my parents ran Russ and Daughters for 30 years, from the late 70s to 2009. So I grew up in the store. I grew up, with the smell of pickled herring and, watching my parents hug and kiss their customers. And I just thought that's what you did when you went to pick up your bagels. I understood there was something magical about this tiny little shop on East Houston Street. But I also was educated to do anything but that. I was educated to be the Jewish success story. And so in a way, after college, I took about 7 years to do all of the life paths that I thought that society expected me to do. And I realized in retrospect, I was basically, checking them off in order to get to the bottom of the list, which was this store on East Houston Street. And it took me a while to shift my perspective, because I had to give up this idea that this ethos we have in this country of, you have to go off and do your own thing, forget your roots, leave that behind, do something, better or more professional. I thought at one point that if I ended up doing what my, peddling herring like my great-grandfather, that somehow I hadn't succeeded. And so it took a while to turn that around and actually realize that this was this was not an obligation, this was not a failure, but continuing this yichus, this lineage, was in fact a beautiful gift, and it was an opportunity. And the opportunity was to maintain and hold a space for us collectively to identify as Jews, as New Yorkers, to keep a physical space in New York, in a city where everything changes and, you know, a building goes up, it goes down, we don't remember what was there. And food is one of these, just the most powerful vehicles I think we have for remembering who we are and where we come from. Memory. So after all that, after a lot of thinking, I came back and Josh and I teamed up because we realized that we had a double obligation, which is to maintain this tradition, but also keep it moving forward. You know, we couldn't just, Russ and Daughters couldn't just be a stagnant thing. It's living, you know, it's not history, it's living history. And we had to move it forward so that, you know, hopefully it will be around for another 4 generations.
Thank you. I think going along those lines, I think many, you know, people would absolutely agree that Russ and Daughters is a beloved chapter in the history of the Jewish community here, of New York, which I think also has kind of like a biblical narrative. You know, Joel begat Hattie and Ida and Ann, who begat Mark, who worked alongside Maria, who begat Niki and Russ, a herring and mushroom barrel in Pushcart on Orchard Street became a store opening at 179 East Houston in 1920, which begat, many years later, the Cafe on Orchard Street, the restaurant, the Jewish Museum, and this amazing new space at the Brooklyn Naval Yard. You're talking, expanding on what you're just talking about, Niki, how do you guys actually balance, though, like this thriving and this growing, while also still being that place that people find is the quintessential plate or platter of food that they need to celebrate all their different life cycles or just a Saturday, you know, with their family? How do you balance that?
Well, as Niki was just saying, when we came to own Russ and Daughters in 2010, we were of the same mind that we wanted to grow the business. The office in the back of the store is really small. We needed more space, one reason. But in growing that business, we want to stay connected to the history of our family and the store and those foods. So in any of these expansions, we really focus on the soul of Russ and Daughters, which is really that store and that experience when you walk in and that smell of the herring and the smoked salmon and the bagels and all those things mixing together. So in any of this growth that we do, where we are behind closed doors discussing like the minutia, couldn't believe the arguments and conversations we have about like little design things or like the service type and then we always try to refocus back on what the store is and what the store means to people and how we can translate that to a new location.
Yeah, I'd say everything we've done has really happened very organically, born out of the objective of keeping Russ and Daughters around for another 105 years. So the question is, well, how do we do that? And, you know, opening Russ and Daughters Cafe, our restaurant, came from feeling so terribly when customers would literally walk into our kitchen in the back of the store because they just assumed that's where tables were, and then we'd have to send them out to the bench outside in 20-degree weather. And
I only did it once, but no.
and people love it, and you know it's a thing. But we felt like, you know what, we need to provide a space where people can have a proper meal, and so we became restaurateurs. And then we, you know, saw the sort of sad demise of what a real New York bagel has become, and the Bialys are basically essentially no more. And we thought, well, now we're going to have to become bakers, you know, because we have to open our own bakery to preserve the continuity of our food tradition and our taste memories. And, you know, same thing with the Jewish Museum, to have a kosher location where we can expand the tent of who's coming is very special to us. And most recently, to have the space that we do, I hope you can all come to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. You know, we've gone from like the shtetl tenement space to a large space where we don't have to turn people away for their Yom Kippur order when they're calling a week in advance. And previously we'd had to say, I'm sorry, we're booked because we literally don't have space in our refrigerator for you. And now to have the space to, grow and send Russ and Daughters all over the country.
And to be for another 100 years.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's always in, guiding everything we've done.
It's amazing. I'm getting this signal, but I have one more question to ask. Because obviously we could just talk here forever and ever and ever. I read this amazing article in Eater about the classic, which I think most of us think of, okay, bagel, cream cheese, some type of salmon thing inside. What I loved about it is you were all telling a story about not only how you think about the minutia of it, but also all the different other businesses that you work with, and even businesses that are also multi-generation in the city and throughout the country to really deliver, this experience every time. But so I'm wondering though, how do you each take the classic?
The classic for me is a pumpernickel bagel with plain cream cheese and wild Western Nova. Simple.
The classic for me is whatever bagel or bialy that is coming right out of the oven at our bakery. And I'm a scallion cream cheese girl, and then honestly I'll look in the showcase and I'll pick, I feel like an alta cocker saying this, I'll pick a nice piece of fish and hand sliced. So we are still preserving that craft of hand slicing all of our smoked salmon, making bagels, taking 2 days to make bagels, using cream cheese that doesn't have the gums and preservatives that you would find on the supermarket shelf. And so I think all of these things together give you that platonic form of the classic bagel knots.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sponsoring.
Thank you for all being here.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.